Never beat another man's cock without his explicit verbal consent. The United States is full of strange, confusing, and outdated laws, but of all the laws in all the states, there is none more controversial than Florida's Stand Your Ground law. This is the one where it's like, you better get the fuck off my property or I'm legally gonna kill you. It's kind of wild. Kevin writes it, I read it. Format of the show, welcome. The full text of the law is needlessly long, but the most important part is that, quote, a person who is in a dwelling or residence in which the person has a right to be has no duty to retreat and has the right to stand his or her ground and use or threaten to use force, with it then detailing all the types of force that are allowed, up to and including deadly force. Why not just say deadly force and below? Because then you could just be like, I just blew on your face. Get out of my house. Also, I will use a shotgun on your chest. And then your face, as well as blowing on it. Pop, pop, motherfucker. This was the initial statute anyway, though it has been expanded to extend to anywhere at all rather than just in a person's home. It's an overly broad law that has encouraged a lot of people to shoot first and ask questions later, resulting in a number of high-profile cases with verdicts that can only be described as questionable at best. Of course, just because that law is on the books and is commonly used as a defense, that doesn't mean it always works. Oh, doesn't it? Okay. I mean, it sounds like, isn't there something also called like castle doctrine or some shit where it's like you could defend your castle? And I'm like, castle doctrine is like the most American sounding thing that I've ever heard. It could be something entirely else because I'm just talking out of my bottom, but maybe. So let's see how Florida man attempted to use the stand your ground defense with varying results. Building a website sounds complicated unless you use today's sponsor, Squarespace. Look, whether you're launching an online business, a portfolio, just claiming your own space online, Squarespace makes it... I was tweaking my own Squarespace website this morning. I was like, I just need to change that little thing. I remember back in the day, you'd be like, HTML codes, or whatever the hell they make. I remember being in like computer club because at school I was extremely cool. And you'd be making things in HTML. It was an absolute nightmare. It was really complicated. And then Squarespace, or what was it? GeoCities. Do you guys? In all the ad briefs it says don't mention competitors. I don't think GeoCities is a competitor anymore, but that was the like janky web builder that we'd use as kids when we didn't want to do HTML. Squarespace blows that shit out of the water, obviously, because it's 20 years later and it's Squarespace. They're the goat. Look, obviously, I built my website with Squarespace. They have templates. It's drag and drop. It's done. There's built-in SEO. There's email campaigns. You want to sell something too? They do that as well. You want to make a course and sell that? Yes. Make money with Squarespace. Why not? Head to squarespace.com/blaze for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use my code BLAZE to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. Thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring, and now back to today's episode. Florida man stands his ground by shooting at fleeing nerds. When someone's fleeing, you're not standing your ground, are you? It's kind of like right there in the part about them fleeing. The summer of 2016 was a pretty magical time, the likes of which I suspect I'll never see again in my lifetime. What the fuck happened in 2016? In July of that year, Niantic released the game Pokémon Go to the world. Oh my god, I remember that. And it was embraced by large swaths of society in a way that's really hard to imagine if you weren't there. Everyone was playing this. It was like, I remember when this came out, I was just like sitting at dinner in a restaurant and everyone around me is like on their phones looking for Pokemons. I did download it and then I was like, this isn't for me. And then I never played it. In case anyone is somehow unaware of how the game works, Pokemon Go is an augmented reality game where you use your phone to venture out into the real world in search of Pokemon. And because everybody will see the same Pokemon at the same times and locations, it created a highly cooperative community rather than fostering competition and individualism. In those early days of the game, it wasn't uncommon for a random stranger to see you looking at your phone while you were walking and have them tell you about a rare Pokemon that appeared nearby so you could go and catch it as well. If someone said that to me, I'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about? I'm literally writing a note. I'm just adding to my to-do list. What are you talking about? I'm texting. Although the player base isn't as massive as it once was, the game has remained immensely popular. I didn't know. I kind of thought it just faded into nothingness. I don't see anyone playing Pokemon Go anymore. Unfortunately, while Niantic succeeded in their main goal of making it's loads of money, they failed in their secondary goal of getting people to go outside and walk around. There was a lot of that early on, but people quickly realized it was far more efficient to play the game while driving instead. Oh god, you're just ruining the environment. I mean, not while driving, that would be dangerous and illegal, but by just driving from location to location where Pokemon were commonly found. Can you imagine just going out? I mean, I know I get people do this all the time. It's called a hobby or whatever, but just driving around to catch digital things. That would be almost as insane as just having your computer constantly burning the shit out of its graphics card to like somehow earn imaginary money. And that's exactly what two teenage boys were doing in June of 2018 when they foolishly parked in front of the wrong house at about 1:30 a.m. The game would tell you what Pokemon were in your general area, and the boys were desperately trying to find a Marowak and a Taurus that were somewhere close. Fascinating. One of the boys asked the other, "Did you get anything?" Then Florida Man stepped in front of their car and pointed his gun at them, telling them not to move. According to Florida Man, he was woken up by a loud noise, at which point he saw a car in front of the house. He took his gun outside to investigate, and when he heard the boy asking, "Did you get anything else?" he took it as meaning that they'd just robbed his house. Well, even if that's true, they'd just robbed the house. They're leaving. You can't shoot them.
You sound stupid!
That's a weird assumption to make, especially since he didn't even try to get their license plate number or anything so police could track them down, but whatever. Maybe he's just like, I'm just going to shoot him. This is my excuse. He's like, finally, the day has arrived. I can shoot somebody legally. This has been my dream since I got rejected from the police force for violence. Seeing that there was a gun pointed at them, the driver quickly sped away so as not to be shot. But Florida Man had ground to stand. God damn it! The law said he was allowed to use lethal force to stop someone from committing a forcible crime like breaking and entering, and he was absolutely determined to use that level of force. He's dreamed about it. And he opens fire at the car as it sped away because nothing says reasonable use of self-defense like shooting someone who is running away as fast as they can. It's cowardly, that's what it is, dude. You think you're being a big man? You fucking coward bitch. When the boys got back home, they discovered they hadn't been injured, and so this event almost went without ever being reported. It wasn't until the driver's mother asked her why her car had a flat tire and was full of bullet holes that the police got involved. Yeah, the boys would just be like, no, we won't tell anyone, she'll never notice. Why is there so many holes in the side of my damn car? From everything I've described, this absolutely does not sound like a case where stand your ground would apply. And who knows, maybe that defense wouldn't have held up at trial. I sure as hope not, but we'll never know because Florida Man's actions were at least tangential enough to standing his ground that no charges were ever filed. Hence, I don't know the names of any of the parties involved. As far as I can tell, the police actually aren't allowed to arrest anyone who claims self-defense unless there is tangible evidence to prove that they're lying. That's a crazy law, Florida. As insane as that sounds, and it does sound insane, Kevin, indeed, it is still not as insane as this little bit of Pokemon lore I have for you, Simon. One of the Pokemon the kids was hunting for, Marowak, is the evolved form of Cubone. No way, Kevin! The evolved form of Cubone! Dude, that's crazy, Kevin. That's crazy. The evolved... Shit! Cubone is a cute little dinosaur that uses a bone as a club and always wears a skull on its head. The skull it wears belongs to its deceased mother, the thought of which frequently brings it to tears. Well, just take it the fuck off then.
No, I don't think I will.
If you're like wearing your deceased mother's skull as a hat, just don't wear the fucking hat, you dumb fucking Pokemon bitch. Which frequently is its tears because the Pokedex entries for this children's game are full of nightmare fuel, which works out great because the Pokedex also says that Drowsy will come into kids' rooms while they sleep and eat their dreams through their nostrils. Pokemon, man. Pokemon's weird. Florida Man stands his high ground against a vicious iguana. Is it iguana or iguana? Iguana, right? Iguana. 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 Maybe it's an American thing. Iguana. Iguana sounds American. Iguana sounds British. I'm going to go for iguana just to make myself feel extra British today. Dear 43-year-old Florida man PJ Patterson and his lawyer tell it PJ was just a nice guy trying to do the right thing. Patterson claimed to have seen an iguana in the road and he didn't want it to get run over by a car. He grabbed the iguana and carried it into the Lake Worth Cultural Plaza where he was going to hang out with his friends. Unfortunately for PJ, the crowd of people agitated the iguana, causing it to bite his arm so severely that he needed to get 22 staples to... Isn't it new what? How? Holy shit! 22 staples! That's an enormous wound. I had 4 staples when I cracked my head open. And that felt like a lot... stitches. And that felt like a lot. 22? PJ then kicked the iguana as far as he could to incapacitate it. Honestly, PJ, I'm with you on this one so far. F*** iguanas. Not only did he feel that this was appropriate retaliation for the unprovoked attack, but he believed that it may have been medically necessary. PJ feared that the iguana may have envenomated him, so he needed to incapacitate it in order to preserve its antidote. Fair play, PJ. Fair play! PJ's lawyer filed a motion to dismiss the case under Florida's Stand Your Ground law as the use of lethal force to prevent imminent death or great bodily harm is absolutely legal. What the f***? in crime has he committed here? He kicked an iguana. Look, I'm not like, let's go out and kick animals, but it just bit him on the fucking arm. I'd probably do the same thing. What's the crime? This is ridiculous. The previous one, it's like that dude needs to go to prison because he shot up a car with 2 boys in it who were fleeing. This guy kicked an iguana and he got arrested? What the Florida? Of course, there are a couple of things to note here. First of all, that's not how iguanas or venom work. Yeah, but TJ doesn't know this. I don't know this. Iguanas are venomous, but very weakly so. They don't really need venom because they have sharp teeth and a powerful bite and also claws. After all, a single bite left a dude needing 22 staples in his arm. Even if it was dangerously venomous, though, animals are not filled with the antidote to their own venom. That'd be weird. No, but I was assuming they used that to make the venom, or what type of iguana it is. Oh, I'm kind of with PJ on this one. I think this is fine. We may use their venom to create anti-venom with the help of big animals like horses. Today I found out, but they don't naturally have an anti-venom reservoir in their bodies. Regardless, the prosecution saw things a bit differently than PJ did, probably because they had a 30-minute surveillance video from the plaza that showed what really happened. PJ did carry an iguana in from the street into the plaza, though it seemed to be perfectly happy just hanging out with everyone. But then PJ spent a few minutes tormenting the iguana, provoking it like he was looking for a fight. He then picked it up with his arm, at which point the iguana bit him. What followed was a solid 9 minutes of PJ chasing the iguana around the plaza and repeatedly kicking it as hard as he could. Alright, I was on PJ's side because what he did seemed reasonable. Now he seems like a f***ing psycho. The assault only ended when emergency services arrived to treat PJ's wounds. PJ was taken to the hospital and the iguana was picked up by Palm Beach County Animal Care and Control. It unfortunately died of its injuries en route to the animal hospital, but Animal Control was just going to euthanize it anyway, so the end result was the same. Except for the iguana, who was tortured to death, rather than just being like... or however they kill animals, I don't know. I assume it's an injection. As for PJ's motion to dismiss on the basis of standing his ground, that defense did not fly at all. Not only was he clearly the aggressor in the case, but the prosecution argued that the law only applies to murdering humans, not animals. PJ pled guilty to animal cruelty and was sentenced to 9 months in prison. You deserve it, PJ, you psycho. I hope you learned a lesson. The irony of all of this is that iguanas are an invasive species in Florida. It's totally legal to kill them on private property and lots of public property as well. The only reason this became an issue was because PJ had to be such a dick. Florida man stands his ground by shooting man and beating him with a golf club. Once again, we have 2 very different accounts of what happened in this case. 77-year-old Florida man Robert Levine claimed that he was enjoying a round of golf at a senior community because that's what old people in Florida do. That's what old people do all over the world, Kevster. As he was approaching the 14th green, he encountered 64-year-old Herbert Merritt walking his dog. Robert kept telling Herbert that he wasn't allowed to walk his dog on the course, and after being completely ignored, he called Herbert a schmuck. Herbert replied by allegedly calling Robert a Jew bastard. Because of this comment, Robert made the logical assumption that he was about to be the victim of a violent anti-Semitic attack. Now fearing for his life, the only reasonable course was to drive his golf cart right over Herbert. That's psycho, dude. He's just insult. How does he even know you're Jewish? How? You know, because if you're afraid someone is going to murder you, the best thing to do is get as close to them as possible. Robert claims that Herbert grabbed a golf club from the golf cart and swung it at his head. You're gonna die, clown! So he pulled out his pistol and fired some warning shots into the ground. Unfortunately, a fragment of one of the bullets ricocheted off the ground and struck Herbert's ankle, at which point Robert called 911. This doesn't sound like what actually happens. It sounds like he's making something up. Unsurprisingly, Herbert's account of events was very much different. Herbert was indeed walking his dog on the course when he noticed Robert using the wrong club for the shot he was about to make. This also doesn't sound real. As a 4-handicap golfer, Herbert just wanted to help a fellow golfer out with his club choice. Robert didn't care for this unsolicited advice, so he drove his golf cart over to Herbert and began yelling about the dog being on the course. Wow, this is like, these guys, it's just painting completely different pictures, but they both seem like dicks. Robert then pulled out his gun, so Herbert fled. Robert opened fire, and he began chasing Herbert around a tree, shooting at him until he finally struck Herbert's ankle. With the know-it-all golfer incapacitated, Robert went back to his cart, grabbed a club, and started beating Herbert while he was on the ground in self-defense. There were 2 witnesses to the event, both of whom corroborated Herbert's version of what happened. Robert was charged with attempted murder. Good, he's like 75. Discharging a firearm in public, aggravated battery with a firearm, and aggravated battery with a deadly weapon, the golf club. So was this a crazy person trying to kill a man for telling him what to use a golf club for? Or was it a violent hate crime in the making, only avoided because Robert chose to stand his ground rather than allowing Herbert to kill him? According to Robert's lawyer, the biggest challenge for us was having a surviving victim being wheeled in a wheelchair, testifying from the wheelchair with accompanying photographs of him being shot in the ankle, testifying to his multiple surgeries. Yes, it certainly sounds like having your client's gunshot victim testify about how your client shot him without provocation would be a bit of a hurdle for the defense. It does seem pretty locked down, no? This took place in April of 2022, but we just got a verdict a couple of weeks ago, and it turns out Herbert's testimony and the testimony of the corroborating witnesses wasn't that big of a hurdle after all. Prosecutors wound up not pursuing the attempted murder charge, and Robert was found not guilty of the other gun-related crimes. Holy shit, Robert got away with attempted murder? Even though witnesses stated that Herbert was running away and had never assaulted Robert, opening fire was totally justifiable. He was just standing his ground. What the Florida? Like, I don't know if I want to send the 75-year-old man to prison because he's probably just like demented or some shit. But like, he needs some sort of punishment. Beating Herbert with a... Mate, fucking send him to old person prison. Where do they send old people? Do old people go to regular prison? I'd like them to go to like old person's prison. Beating Herbert with a golf club after already shooting him was a step too far though, so he's convicted of the assault and is awaiting sentencing. Florida man stands his ground by opening fire on police deputies. I feel like police deputies are probably like immune from the people who do the stand in the ground thing. John DeRossett wasn't always a Florida man. After spending his life working as a mechanic for General Motors, he finally decided it was time to go and retire in Florida. Once his plans were made, his family requested that he bring his niece, Mary, along with him. Mary had been battling opioid addiction, and the family thought that maybe a new environment would be beneficial for her. Florida? Isn't Florida like, I feel like if there was a state that was on like more prescription drugs than others, it would be Florida, no? It was not, and instead Mary resorted to sex work to make the money to buy her pills. John had no idea this was going on though. He was just living his happy retired life. On August 20th, 2015, John went to an evening church service. I guess I'm going to hell because I didn't even know they had church services on Thursday nights. I just assumed they did because people love religion. Anyway, John got home from church, made dinner, and sat down to watch some TV, and that's when he heard Mary screaming for help from the front yard. Mary had been expecting a client to come over, and she received a text message that he was there. She opened the door and invited him inside, but he instead grabbed her and pulled her into the yard. When John reached the door with his Glock, he saw 3 men struggling with his niece. He assumed they were trying to kidnap her and said something to that effect, so he fired a warning shot. So far, completely fair. I'm with John. But instead of fleeing, the men all opened fire on John. John returned fire and struck one of the assailants, though he was hit by 2 bullets as well. Mary, who was now free since the men were too busy firing their guns to keep an eye on her, helped John back inside and called 911 to report the attempted kidnapping and gunshot wounds. And she too assumed it was an attempted kidnapping because at no point during this exchange did the 3 men attempt to identify themselves as undercover deputies. Oh yeah, no, they're the police engaging in a sting operation to arrest her for misdemeanor solicitation. I know I said about the cops being like, shouldn't, you can't shoot a cop if he's coming to your house, you're standing your ground or whatever. If you don't know he's a cop and he's undercover and he's doing something like this, then fair play. Now, I don't know if you just made the same mistake I did, but when I read all of this, I assumed that John's wayward niece was in her late teens or early 20s.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I didn't assign her an age. As it turns out, however, she was 42 and worked under the name Cougar. Anyway, we've already seen some pretty ridiculous attempts to invoke the stand your ground doctrine in this episode, but this seems like a textbook example of when it should actually apply. Yes, John had a reasonable belief that his niece was being kidnapped, so he used lethal force to stop the crime. Note that, legally speaking, even firing a warning shot counts as using lethal force. Oh yeah, because it's just lethal force. It doesn't actually have to have been lethal. It just has the potential to be lethal. Like my fists. Stop fisting me! And once the men opened fire on him, of course, he had the right to return fire. As it turns out, though, while it may be okay to stand your ground by attempting to murder unarmed people running for their lives, it's not okay to stand your ground by shooting at undercover cops who are shooting at you. John was arrested and charged with 3 counts of first-degree attempted murder, a crime that carries the punishment of life in prison. This would be extremely unfair on him. I think it's the perfect example of this. Stand your ground law. The police were quick to go on the offensive, eager to paint John as a cop killer and a pimp. Of course, yes. Based on what? Of course, he hadn't actually killed anyone. He did strike one of the deputies below his bulletproof vest, put him in critical condition, but the deputy made a full recovery. And as I said before, he had no knowledge of what his niece was up to. But if you're expecting a jury trial, then what's more important, the truth or a major smear campaign to get public support on your side? There was also a lot of speculation that this whole situation was political in nature. This was happening just after the whole scandal with the Ashley Madison leaks, and a lot of people were of the opinion that the police were just after Mary to get a hold of her appointment book, which may or may not have had the names and phone numbers of important people in it. Oh god, there's a conspiracy as well. I love it. I'm pretty sure that was a combination of baseless speculation and wishful thinking from people hoping to see a big scandal in their area, but it was still a theory. Yeah, it sounds like a conspiracy theory. Regardless, law enforcement's efforts to put this vicious criminal behind bars were successful, as John was convicted of attempted murder. Luckily, we do have an appeals process, so he was going to get another crack at getting the charges dismissed, and since the basis for his defense was the stand your ground law, who better to turn to than one of the attorneys that helped defend George Zimmerman, the poster boy for the stand your ground laws. I don't know who George Zimmerman is. I feel like I definitely do. The name's ringing bells, but I don't quite remember. If you're unfamiliar with George Zimmerman, Kevin, you know me too well. And the legality and the legally considered not murder of Trayvon Martin, you can go look that up yourself. It's absolutely not Brainblaze material. Is this one of the cops who killed just a random black dude? Yeah. All you need to know was that this was the right person for the job because after 5 years behind bars, John's case was completely thrown out on appeal. According to his lawyer, it was far better than an acquittal. This order means that John is innocent, that his actions were justified, and that he never should have been arrested in the first place. It's total vindication. Good. Florida man stands his ground against aggressive cock. That story was a bit too serious to end on, so here's a quick story about a guy trying to beat off a cock. Hey, according to Florida man and Temu David Kochner? Who the fuck's David Kochner?
I don't know.
James Nix, he had gone out to check his mail when his neighbor's rooster started harassing him. James went back to his yard, but the rooster followed him, posturing like it wanted to attack. James claimed that he picked up a stick and swung at it to defend himself, but the rooster had jumped at him, so he caught it in the head, killing it. According to kids in the neighborhood, however, James had intentionally beaten the chicken to death. He did intentionally beat the chicken to death. He was arrested for animal cruelty, a charge that he found ridiculous. In an interview, told the reporter, "Chickens die every day, people, at churches, Popeyes, and Kentucky Fried Chicken." He later added, "I didn't know I had to give it a 21-gun salute, CPR, mouth to mouth, or call the chicken ambulance." Next thing you know, he calls the chicken police on me. Well, he sort of makes a good point. You can't just go around killing people's pets. Also, since I'm sure you haven't heard of it, Simon, Church's is another fast food chicken restaurant. I haven't, Kevster, but I got it from the context. Honestly, I hadn't heard of it either until I looked it up, and I was wondering what the type of pagan church he was sacrificing barnyard animals at. However, since the rooster stalked James to his own property, it appears that he was able to make the successful use of the stand your ground defense. Although he was initially arrested, spent 30 hours in jail, the charges were dropped. James may have been let off the hook, but let this serve as an important reminder: never beat another man's cock without his explicit verbal consent or the implicit consent that accompanies any visit to a glory hole. Exactly. A lesson that will be useful for everyone. Thank you for watching. Finally, the day has arrived. I can shoot somebody legally.